When Caleb opened the heavy front door that evening, the hallway lights fell like soft gold on the marble, and the house felt warmer than usual. The table was laid. The flowers were white and careful. The silver looked like small moons. He told himself that this was kindness. He told himself that a good father creates the right stage. Yet under the polished calm, his chest carried an old ache like a stone he could not name. He had invited his son's fiancée into that bright space, and for a moment he felt proud of his own generosity. But the pride was thin. The plan beneath it was not. People would come. Faces he had chosen would arrive with easy laughter and quick eyes. The room would glow, and everything would look simple. And still, even before the first knock, the walls felt close. Because the night was not truly about meeting the girl who loved his son. It was about something else. He wanted the room to tell a different story. He wanted everyone to see what he could not say out loud. He wanted an answer to a wish he had never admitted, not even to Nora in the quiet after midnight. He stood there with a smile that did not reach his eyes. And when Leonie stepped into the light, he knew the house had become a mirror. It would show him, it would show everyone. Caleb had not been born to money. He grew up in rooms that held winter, even in spring. His mother kept a tin of sugar on the highest shelf, and his father worked with hands that never softened. The first time he touched real silk, he thought it felt like water that stayed. He learned early that the world listened when you carried the right weight. The city was a door that opened to those who could name the price. He became good at prices. He learned to wear a suit like a second skin, learned to let silence do the work of 10 sentences, learned to hold a glass in a way that signaled ease. He met Nora at a friend's wedding. She had a quiet way of seeing things. She did not chase the light in the room. She watched where it fell, and she noticed who stood outside it. Her kindness had edges. She could be soft and still know when to hold back. He admired that. He married her quickly because it felt wise. Love came in small waves. It was not the kind that burns, it was the kind that hums. They built a life that looked good from the road. A long driveway, a balcony with vines, holidays that ran on time, 2 dogs, a son who laughed like sun on water. And yet, in the corners of Caleb's mind, there lived a thought that he visited the way some men visit an old town. It held faces he had turned away from. It held promises he had traded for respect. Jackson grew with a gentle stubbornness. He studied hard because he liked the quiet that fell over his desk when numbers made sense. He worked small jobs without complaint. He saved 4 things and felt proud when he reached them. He did not lean on his father's name, not out of anger, but because the weight of it did not fit him. At university, he met Leonie in a corner of the library where the light was soft and the tables were scarred. She sorted books for a little money. She had the kind of face that did not demand attention. It asked for honesty instead. She listened more than she spoke. When she smiled, it felt like a promise kept. She lived with an aunt in a small flat above a tailor shop. She made tea in a dented kettle. She ironed her dresses until the fabric learned to obey. Dignity followed her like a shadow that never left, even when rain fell. When Jackson brought her home for a short visit one afternoon, Nora noticed the way Leonie placed her bag on the floor. She rested it by her feet instead of the chair. She sat straight but not stiff. She looked at the room as if it were a painting she did not want to smudge. Jackson watched her with the care of someone who knows the cost of misunderstanding. Nora found the sight tender. She cut fruit in the kitchen and felt a thread from long ago pull at her. She had once been the girl who watched where not to step. She had once measured each word so it would not sound like a request. She wanted to make the house kinder for Leonie. She placed a small vase of jasmine near the window, and the room filled with a faint sweetness. Caleb came home that day, just as the rain stopped. He saw the girl in the sitting room and felt something tighten in his chest. She was lovely in a way that resisted the camera. No gloss could make her more. She had a steadiness that unsettled him. He welcomed her with the right words. He smiled and asked the right questions. He admired the way she answered, calm and clear. And then he felt the plan climb back into his mind like a cat returning to its high shelf. His company had grown fast in recent years. He sat across tables from men who chose their watches the way they chose friends. He was used to soft yeses and careful nos. A partner from an old family had approached him with a suggestion that sounded like a toast. It involved land permissions and the daughter whose photograph sat on a piano in a quiet gray house by the lake. The daughter had studied in cities where winter lives in glass. She could speak about things that happen in rooms with high ceilings. Their names together would make the door to a bigger room open with less effort. Nothing was said plainly. It did not need to be. The suggestion walked around the truth like a polite guest. The truth was simple. If Jackson stood beside that daughter at the right parties, investors would stand closer to Caleb at his. He told himself this was about giving his son choice. He told himself that good fathers do not hold their children in small futures. He told himself a man can create better roads for those he loves. He did not tell himself that he was tired of asking for space in rooms he had already built. He did not tell himself that the old ache was about the life he had not dared to live and the woman he had not dared to love with his whole body. Because safety had looked like fairness, and fairness had looked like Nora. He planned a dinner. He called it a welcome. He invited the partner and his wife, the daughter, a few others who carry weather with them when they walk in. He asked the chef to design a menu that sounded like calm and tasted like wealth. He asked Jackson to wear the blue suit. He asked Leonie through Nora to bring her aunt if she wished. He arranged the chairs so the names would fall in certain patterns. He did not notice that in arranging people like cutlery, he began to lose sight of their hands. Leonie worked late the evening before, stitching an old hem for a neighbor who paid in gratitude in small coins. She looked at the dress she planned to wear and saw the years on it. It was simple and well kept. She brushed the fabric and thought of the first time she had worn it, to a school ceremony where her aunt had clapped with small, careful hands. She pinned the loose thread and placed the dress on the chair. She did not think about the room where it would stand out. She thought about Jackson's face when he relaxes. She had fallen in love with the way he takes joy in small things. A warm loaf, an on-time bus, a good pen. She trusted that kind of love because it is the kind that cooks for you when you are sick and laughs at nothing when the rain goes on too long. Nora prepared the house as if she were preparing a heart for confession. She chose plates, then changed them. She lit one candle, then blew it out. She remembered dinners in their first home when the walls still smelt of paint. There had been more laughter then, but it had lived at the edges. Over time, laughter had moved to the center. Then it had learned to leave early. That is how long marriages shift, not with storms, but with tides. She wanted that night to be kind to the girl her son loved. She told herself she could make it so. She had once believed she could make many things so. The guests came with the sound of tires on gravel and the easy hush of shoes on stone. The partner's wife had perfume that turned the air into an orchard. The daughter wore a dress that said she knew how to be looked at without being touched by eyes. She greeted Nora with a politeness that had been practiced. Nora saw the practice and did not mind it. Practice is a form of respect. The first course reached the table with hands that had done this for years. The evening moved like a train that had never been late. Caleb watched all the pieces find their places. He kept an eye on the partner's gaze. He tilted his attention like a glass toward the daughter. He asked her about the work she wanted to do, and he listened with care that grew roots. He asked Jackson soft questions that led toward the life that would be easier to sell. He made the story sound like it had already happened. He did this with such grace that even he forgot for a moment that there was a cost waiting at the door. Leonie felt the room the way a bird feels wind. She sensed the currents that did not belong to her. She watched the glances like small coins being exchanged. She smiled when it was right to smile. She nodded when the table moved toward a topic that did not offer her a seat. She placed her fork down when silence asked for it. She did not draw back, but she did not lean in. She let the evening be what it was. She laughed once, not loudly, at a story about a summer school and a broken oar. Her laugh was clear and then gone. A few people turned. They looked as if they had heard a bell from a church they did not remember attending. Jackson enjoyed his father's warmth as a plant enjoys winter light. He had learned over years to be grateful for small kindnesses from a man who often spoke in weather rather than words. He noticed the attention his father gave the daughter from the lake house. He noticed the care in the questions. He felt a small thread of irritation and then cut it with compassion. He told himself his father wanted the best for him. He told himself that a room like this needs a language he is still learning. He looked across at Leonie. He saw the quiet in her eyes and felt both love and worry. He did not know why worry had come to sit beside the love. He wanted to reach for her hand under the table. He kept his hand still. Nora watched from her place like a gardener who knows her roses are in someone else's vase. She saw Caleb making the table comfortable for a future she did not recognize. She saw Leonie shrink and not shrink. There is a way some women become smaller without losing any of their shape. It is a kind of strength that confuses some men. Nora recognized it. It broke something soft in her. She thought of the girl she had been when she first entered Caleb's life. She had owned 3 dresses then. She had learned to stand at the right angle to a conversation. She had learned to leave a room before anyone could ask her to. She felt anger rise, then fall. There is a kind of anger that comes from love itself. It does not demand, it does not slam doors. It simply refuses to lie. She carried that anger like a glass of water she would not spill. As the main course landed with a gentle thud, the house lost power. The lights went out like a held breath released. For one suspended second, the room became a drawing. The only glow came from a window where the last of the evening clung to the sky. Someone reached for a phone. A small laugh rose and died. The staff moved like shadows. A storm had been playing at the edges of the city all afternoon, and now it had touched their street with 2 fingers and a grin. The generator spluttered and then changed its mind. In the soft dark, people reveal the habits of their hearts. Some wait, some direct, some retreat into themselves. Leonie stood. Her chair made a small sound that felt brave. She moved to the kitchen without asking permission from the quiet. She found a box of candles in a drawer near the stove. She arranged them in glasses because glasses are steady. She asked the staff, with gestures and eyes, where the matches were. She lit one, then many, and the room began to look like itself again, but older and more honest. She saw that the oven's heat was fading. She set the covered dishes near the flame so they would hold warmth, then moved to the sink to fill jugs from a tap that still sang. She carried a tray like she had always lived in this house, like the house had been waiting for her to know it. The partner's wife relaxed. The daughter from the lake house stood near the window, as if the dark could stain her dress. Nora felt relief move through her body like music. She followed Leonie into the kitchen and found tasks that fit her hands. The 2 women worked without the need to perform. They plated food that was meant to arrive in pairs, and now came in sequences that made sense only from close up. They made sense. That is what the best people do when plans fall apart. They make sense. At the table, Caleb kept the conversation afloat with the rhythm of someone who has hosted more nights than he can count. He told stories that did not need light. He asked questions that gave people back their faces. He watched Lenny's shape pass in and out of the room like a quiet miracle. He felt something inside him turn. It was small and sharp and refused to be ignored. He had thought the evening would prove a point. It was proving a different one. Then a sound rose from the other end of the hall. It was soft at first, then heavy. Nora had left the kitchen to bring a basket of bread to the table when her knee found the corner of a chair. The pain was sudden and bright. Her breath faltered, and she tried to smile it back into place. The room swayed. She reached for the back of the chair and missed. The floor came up faster than she expected. There is an age at which falling becomes a language of its own. It says things you have tried not to say. Leonie was there before anyone else stood. She knelt with care that did not rush. She placed one hand under Nora's shoulder and one near the wrist that had broken when Jackson was 5. She knew where to hold and how to do it. She asked for salt with a tilt of her chin and water with a lift of her eyes. Someone understood. She helped Nora sit. She checked the color of her mouth. She felt the pulse that tells the truth. She was steady the way some bridges are steady, even when the river rages under them. Nora's breathing slowed. The room exhaled with her. Caleb watched the girl whom he had planned to move, like a piece in a game. He watched her hold his wife with reverence and efficiency. He watched his son's face open like a door he had wanted to enter since the boy was small. The daughter by the window stayed near the window. The partner reached for his glass and found it empty. The storm changed its mind again, and the power returned in a flicker that looked like doubt giving up. The rest of the evening took another shape. People spoke more softly. The conversation found the ground and liked it. The food arrived warm enough. The candles stayed. Nora returned to her seat with a small pillow behind her back. Leonie remained near her and then returned to her small place at the table. Caleb tried to move the pieces back to where he had wanted them. Some nights refused to go back. He felt it. It felt like a hand on his chest saying, "Enough." Jackson carried the stillness of relief like a cloak. He looked at his father and wished for things that had never learned to happen between them. He looked at Leonie and felt the wish become simple. He did not need anything else. He wondered why rooms like this made obvious truths look like choices. He promised himself that he would stop letting other people's eyes decide what his life should look like when photographed. After dessert, people rose. Goodbyes were exchanged with the softness that late evening brings. The partner's wife kissed the air near Nora's cheek. The daughter from the lake house smiled in a way that said she would not have to remember this night if she did not want to. The cars left slowly, as if the gravel itself had decided to hold on. The house fell back into itself. The flowers were still white. The silver was still cold. The candles were small and brave. Nora went to her room to rest. Jackson took Lenny's small bag from the chair and walked her to the door. Caleb stood in the hallway and found that his hands did not know where to be. He told himself he had only wanted the best. He told himself he had not meant harm. He told himself men in his position must plan. But the old ache from before he could name it told a different story. It said that sometimes the best thing you can do for those you love is to stop arranging their faces. In the days that followed, the house moved as houses do after a storm. A few things were put in different drawers. A few others stayed on the counter as if they were not meant to be hidden anymore. Nora teased the dogs in the morning and watched Caleb with a kind of distance that cared. She remembered a winter night years ago when a friend from her childhood had come to town. He had invited her to tea. She had wanted to go, but had not. There had been a dinner that night, too. The partner then had different hair, and the daughter had not yet learned to wear dresses like armor. Nora had chosen the house because the house had chosen her years before, and yet she had felt a thin thread break. She never tied it again. That is how disappointment settles. It does not announce itself. It lives under rugs in rooms that will never be photographed. Leonie returned to her aunt's flat and made tea in the dented kettle and smiled at the plant that refused to stop growing in the small window. She went to work and treated people as if the day were not already heavy. She loved Jackson in a way that made the fear smaller. At night she held her own hand and told herself truths she would never trade for comfort. If this was not her future, she would still be herself. No room could change that. But when she thought of Nora in the half-light, her chest hurt. She had seen something in Nora's eyes, a mix of apology and warning. She wished she could put her head in Nora's lap the way children can and be told that love is enough. She knew that love is sometimes enough and sometimes not, and she could not yet tell which it would be for her. Jackson sought his father 2 days later, in the room with the high shelves and the heavy desk. He stood straight because he had learned that sitting makes some conversations smaller. He told his father about the job he had been offered in a different part of the company, the one that did not involve his last name as a bridge. He told him he would take it. He told him he loved Leonie and would not measure his life by furniture. He spoke the way a man speaks when the truth has finished waiting. Caleb listened, and for once he did not reach for the words to make the truth more comfortable. He heard the river that had always run under the ground between them. He decided to stop pretending it was not there. He drove that afternoon to a neighborhood where the streets do not match, where children play near cats that live like old men. He parked near the tailor's shop and climbed the stairs that had learned to complain. He knocked on a door that had been painted many times. When it opened, he looked smaller than he had in years. Lenny's aunt invited him in as if men like him came every day to ask for simple things. He sat on a chair with a little wobble and spoke like a man who had outlived lies. He did not ask for forgiveness. He asked for patience. He said he would learn. He asked what Leonie needed to keep studying while she worked. He asked what kindness looks like when done correctly. The aunt told him that kindness looks like respect left at the door to take off its shoes. He nodded and said he would remember. He went home and looked for Nora in the garden. She was there, trimming a plant that had gotten ahead of itself. He stood near her and did not speak. She felt him there and did not fill the silence. He took the small scissors from her and held them. He cut a thin branch, and then another. He said at last that he had been wrong to make a public test of a private love. He said he had been afraid. He said afraid twice. The word sounded foreign in his mouth and then became his. Nora closed her eyes and let the sun fall on her lids. Fear is a strange country. People who have lived there can recognize its passport at a glance. She stood beside him and did nothing more. Sometimes that is the only help that does not turn into pressure. In the weeks that followed, The company moved without the weight of expected alliances. The partner with the lake and the piano called twice, and then found other tables. Caleb braced for the cold that follows a closed door, and found that it lasted less time than pride had told him it would. He met with his managers and moved Jackson away from rooms where his last name spoke first. He set up a scholarship in his mother's name at the small college Leonie attended in the evenings. He did not attach a photograph to it. He asked only that the recipients write a letter to someone who had once opened a door for them. He read the letters in his office with the door closed and kept a box of tissues in the drawer. Not because he wanted to cry, but because he wanted to be ready if he did. Readiness is a discipline. Nora invited Leonie to the house one afternoon when the light was kind and the wind had decided to be polite. They walked in the garden and did not talk about dresses. They talked about sturdy shoes and the art of leaving a room before a conversation turns into a trap. They talked about the recipe for the soup that fixes a tired heart. They talked about Jackson as if he were a good boy who had learned to change a tire without swearing. When they returned inside, Nora took a small box from the shelf where she kept the things she would not leave to time. Inside lay a cracked teacup. It had broken on a day when she learned that silence can be dangerous. She had glued it with care. The crack was a thin river. She offered it to Leonie, not as a family heirloom, but as a sentence. The sentence was simple. Some breaks remain visible and still hold tea. Leonie and Jackson decided to marry in a room that did not echo. There were flowers that do not pretend. There were chairs that know how to hold weight. A child dropped a biscuit and cried once and then forgot. People smiled, and no one told the smiles how to look. Caleb stood near the back at first, because the back felt like a way to be humble. Nora took his arm and moved him forward. He looked at his son and saw the boy he had taught to ride a bicycle at dawn on an empty street. He remembered the first time Jackson had fallen and called out, not for help, but to say he was fine. He had not known until then that part of a father's work is to let that call stand. At the small table after, with plates that did not match, Lenny's aunt told a story about a summer when the roof leaked and they learned to sleep under music of rain. People laughed in the kind way. The dog from the tailor shop wandered in and lay under a chair as if he had been invited. Nora took photographs that would not end up anywhere important. Caleb ate cake and discovered that cake tastes better when someone you love has strong hands. He stepped outside for a moment and looked at the sky. It was plain and beautiful. He felt the ache that had sat in his chest for years loosen like a knot finally willing to be undone. Life after weddings is not a straight line. It is a room with windows that open and close without pattern. Jackson and Leonie found a small place near a park where old men play slow games and young boys run as if chased by happiness. They built a home that held their voices. They fought softly and made up honestly. They learned to say, I am tired without making it sound like you are not enough. They made pasta on Sundays and burned it once and laughed until the smoke alarm gave up. Leonie finished her studies and took a job at a clinic where forms and fears arrived together. She listened to people until their words stopped shaking. Jackson worked in a part of the company that smelled like new wood and paint, and sometimes like sweat. He slept well. Caleb and Nora settled into a new weather. They found that some mornings now held easy conversation instead of tasks. They walked at dusk and did not always talk about the day. They spoke of old books as if they were neighbors. He told her stories about his mother's hands that he had not told even himself before. She told him about a teacher who had taught her to speak in a room that had not welcomed her voice. They learned again the way to place bowls on the shelf so they reached together without knocking. There is a domestic tenderness that can look like nothing from the outside. It is how to people forgive in pieces until forgiveness is the air they breathe. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and Nora is reading near the window, Caleb stands in the hallway where the flowers once made the room feel like a theater. He remembers the night he invited his son's poor fiancée home and tried to make the walls speak for him. He remembers the look in Lenny's eye when the power went out and a room full of inconvenience became a room full of honesty. He remembers the way everyone saw who he really wanted. He had wanted a future he could show off, like a new suit, wanted a daughter made of names, wanted a seat in rooms that looked the same no matter which city you are in. He had thought that wanting was harmless because it was wrapped in words like stability and opportunity. He did not know then that what he wanted had been standing in front of him all along, in different shapes: his son's goodness, his wife's steady gaze, the girl's dignity. his own courage to say no to a table that demanded more than it gave. On certain afternoons, Leonie visits with a bundle of papers for Nora to read. They sit with tea in the cracked cup. They do not fix the crack. It is part of the cup's story. Sometimes the dogs wander in and ask to be loved. They are always obliged. Jackson comes later and listens to his father talk about a project that has mud and noise and real work in it. They find themselves laughing at the same moment and are surprised by the ease of it. Ease is not always a gift. Sometimes it is a reward. On the night before their first anniversary, Jackson and Leonie walk past the big house after dinner in town. The lights are on, warm and low. The vines have learned to behave. They see Caleb on the balcony with a blanket on his lap and a book he is not reading. He sees them and does not wave. He does not want to call them up and make them be gracious. He wants them to go home and be young. They stand there anyway, looking up, and he feels his chest fill in a way that does not hurt. He thinks of the boy he once was in the cold kitchen, with the sugar tin on the high shelf. He thinks how proud that boy would be to know that the man he became learned how to place the tin where others could reach. Later, when the house is sleeping, and even the clocks are kind, Caleb steps into the garden. The wind is gentle. The leaves speak in the language leaves use. He stands under the tree that has been there longer than any of them. He remembers everything that matters, and almost none of what used to. He sees the dinner table from that night like a photograph left too long in the sun. He sees the shape of the plan he had made, and the way it dissolved the second a girl lit a candle in a glass. He smiles, not the smile for photographs, but the small one that lives near the truth. He does not want anything he cannot hold with both hands. He does not need rooms that require a posture. He thinks of Nora asleep inside and the dogs at her feet. He thinks of Jackson and Leonie in their small place, a light still on because love, at its best, forgets the switch. He invited his son's poor fiancée home, and in doing so, he invited himself into a room he had avoided for years. Everyone saw who he really wanted that night. They saw him want a future made of polish and proof. They watched as the evening itself refused to agree. Standing in the dark garden now, he feels the wind move through the branches and hears a sound he cannot name. It is quiet and it is old. It is the sound of something that has finally put itself down. He never saw his old plans again, not the way he used to. But every time the night air slipped across the balcony and into the hallway, it carried a whisper that felt like forgiveness. And sometimes, when he paused, it said Lenny's name, and then Nora's, and then Jackson's, and then his own. It said them in order, and then all at once, as if the house itself had learned a better story.